An in-depth look at the people and events that shape our community. This is Iowa in Focus.
This week, the message from multiple candidates about the future of technology in the United States. The issue in Iowa's State House that has busloads of people going to the Capitol to protest. Welcome to Iowa in Focus. We're here giving the context to what happens in the headlines and on the campaign trail every week, and that process starts with the barnstorm. For just the third time since taking office nearly 8 years ago, President Obama addressed the nation from the Oval Office on Monday. He talked about recent terror attacks and how tighter gun control is a first step towards making Americans safer. He also urged Americans to realize that fighting terrorism does not put them at war with any specific religion, and laid out his plan to lead that fight.
First, our military will continue to hunt down terrorist plotters in any country where it is necessary. Second, we will continue to provide training and equipment to tens of thousands of Iraqi and Syrian forces fighting ISIL on the ground. Third, we're working with friends and allies to stop ISIL's operations, to disrupt plots. Fourth, with American leadership, the international community has begun to establish a process and timeline to pursue ceasefires and a political resolution to the Syrian war.
Republican presidential candidates didn't like it. Virtually all of them said that the president had been weak on the international stage, putting the United States in this position in the first place. Fox News suspended 2 contributors for 2 weeks each for using profanity when talking about the president's speech. But Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump made what might end up being one of his most controversial comments of the campaign just this week. After the president's address, Trump called for the United States to stop all Muslim citizens or foreigners alike from coming to the United States.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Many of his fellow candidates and Republicans backed away from those comments, including Speaker of the House Paul Ryan and former Vice President Dick Cheney. Cheney even said that a ban on Muslims goes against everything the United States believes in. A local Iowa college is taking the opposite approach and standing with their Muslim students. The Just Action group at Luther College in Decorah says they know there's a chance the very politicians who have been stirring up anti-Muslim sentiment may actually visit their community. They say they want to make it clear that their community is committed to diversity and inclusion and that those politicians will be met with a strong response. Other presidential candidates from both parties were focusing at least part of their week on the role technology plays in the economy. The presidential tech town hall in Cedar Rapids gave candidates a chance to talk about their policies relating to starting a business in the 21st century and how technology may help. Organizers say Iowa isn't only the first state in the nation to caucus for candidates, but places like the Creative Corridor and Des Moines are hotbeds for entrepreneurs.
It's not just Silicon Valley, it's not just New York that has these young, exciting, growing companies. And what these companies are doing, they're creating jobs and they're building new, amazing technologies.
Julie says the event allows candidates to talk about how they'd help those companies, since they often have to talk about other issues when they're out on the campaign trail. Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina drew on her experience in the private sector to talk about why she knows that business partnerships are so important to the government. The former CEO of Hewlett-Packard says that right now the government isn't partnering with privately owned companies to take advantage of the work that they're already doing. She says a Fiorina administration wouldn't make that mistake.
In order to lead, we need a leader, a president who understands technology and who understands how to use the private sector innovation in technology to solve our most pressing problems, starting with national security problems.
Fiorina says right now there are cable companies and power co-ops like the ones in the Hawkeye State that would like to partner with the government. But she says right now the government is closing them out. On the other side of the aisle, Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley focused more on individual workers at the tech town hall. He says in order for new businesses to succeed, they need a workforce that can solve the problems they face in all stages of development.
When I talk to entrepreneurs, especially in growing sectors, they really need workers that are skilled, that have the talents, especially in IT and other emerging industries, that can do the work that's required.
He says once people have learned those skills, they're also likely to get paid a higher salary for them, which gives them more money to spend and helps the entire economy grow. A proud history is in danger of being lost in a rural Iowa city. Students at Keota High School say budget cuts and more online classes hurt the quality of the education they get, and there's only more cuts on the way. Those problems inspired a group of students to reach out to presidential campaigns in 2016 to get their thoughts on their city's problems.
It's going to put $3 million on us that we're going to put on the burden of the citizens.
Keota Mayor Tony Kanzler says his town faces a financial crisis with EPA regulations in their town's water streams.
The DNR contacted us and let us know that we're not in compliance, and changes were going to have to be made.
That's one of many problems they face in the heartland. Keota Sociology's project to bring presidential candidates to their high school already put these concerns on the campaign trail. On Tuesday, it was Democrat Martin O'Malley's turn.
All around the world,
students say they want the next president to promise dollars will be divided into the right programs.
We don't have a science teacher to teach chemistry.
Freshman Brianna Dua wants to study nursing after graduating, but shakes her head at how lab time doesn't exist.
I like to learn that way with a teacher showing me what to do, so I feel that kind of scares me, yes.
It's just interesting because the reason I took physics is to try to get a head start.
But the idea of getting a head start in this town is just a dream for many down the road, no matter how much they embrace the small town atmosphere.
Having a small community like this presents opportunities that you can't get anywhere else.
For quite some time, this is the most attention we've had.
The students from Keota Sociology class say they want to launch another Twitter campaign, too, with the hashtag Students Saving Schools. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton just announced this week that she'll be at Keota High School on December 22nd. But on Wednesday, she toured the University of Northern Iowa facility, where they work with the largest 3D printer in North America. She said the students she met with are not only getting the training that will get them great jobs when they graduate, but they're also helping Eastern Iowa build the foundation to be on the cutting edge of the manufacturing world.
I asked where that big machine was made. Germany, they said. I said, so what are we going to do about that? And I was really happy when the answer from the faculty member came back. We're working with some folks in Ohio. We're going to see if we can't figure out how to produce this machine in America. That's the kind of thinking that I really want as president to promote more of.
At a town hall meeting that followed, Clinton rolled out a new plan to keep big corporations from avoiding taxes by moving their assets overseas. She says that if Congress doesn't go along with her plans if she wins the White House, she believes she'd be able to enact her plans through executive action. Republican Marco Rubio spent time on a college campus, too, just a little bit farther south. The Florida senator spoke to a crowd at Kinnick Stadium at the University of Iowa, spending a lot of time setting himself apart from older candidates.
Our policies are outdated, and we are led by people that are outdated. Good people. They mean well, but they don't understand the 21st century. They don't understand the pace of innovation. They don't understand the new economy.
Rubio talked a lot about how his student loans got him through college, but would still be a burden to him if he hadn't written a book. He also drove home the idea that college isn't necessarily for everyone, and that vocational training can be a way for people to support a family without a 4-year degree. Cedar Rapids saw one of the largest events on the campaign trail just weeks before the caucuses, calling for limited government and a free market. It put 1st District Congressman Rod Blum in the limelight, but some say the views shaping this event could cause Blum to be a one-time congressman.
Citizens, it is time to take our government and our country back.
The Rising Tide Summit focused on coming back from what GOP candidates called a failed Obama administration.
Mr. President, there is not a moral equivalent between...
1st District Congressman Rod Blum partnered with FreedomWorks to bring 5 presidential candidates to Cedar Rapids.
We want to focus on the economy and helping the working families, middle classes' incomes go up.
Dr. Andy McGuire with the Iowa Democratic Party says events like this one divide Blum from the district he serves.
He's become a very, really extreme advocate in the Tea Party, and this FreedomWorks is exactly that same kind of group. He's aligning himself with people who have very rigid views that I don't think align with the middle class of the 1st District.
I would expect somebody from the Democrat Party to say that.
Big names coming to Northeast Iowa is nothing new for the first-term congressman. He's been flexing political muscle, hosting other candidates at various points in their 2016 campaigns.
Well, thanks, Ron.
He says it lets his constituents see as many White House hopefuls as possible.
And also, we need to get rid of all those regulations.
We have this elitist government.
But that also opens him up to attacks like the one from Dr. McGuire, tying him to what gets said up on stage.
When the 1st District voted for him, I think they thought he was going to be somebody who would work with both sides. That's what he had said.
We think it's a tremendous success. We exceeded our expectations for attendance, and we couldn't be happier.
Dr. McGuire also says that ideas like repealing the Affordable Care Act can only hurt the middle class and puts Blum at even more risk. Every week we'll be going inside Iowa politics, talking about the people not trying to move into the White House. And this week a handful of Iowans were in Des Moines throughout the week protesting the governor's plan to privatize Medicaid. Governor Terry Branstad is looking for federal approval on the January 1st switch to allow 4 private companies to manage Medicaid. Opponents are skeptical that new system won't be for the state's $4 billion program, won't be in their best interest. Coming up later in The Real Story, we'll take a look at how Iowa's Medicaid saga from where it started until the present day. Coming up next on Iowa in Focus, Steffi Lee sits down with Republican presidential candidate Rand Paul to talk about everything from Islamophobia to Donald Trump and the media.
Focus. Today we were joined by Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us. So first things first, I think we need to start off with, a lot of people keep saying that Trump is the front runner. Polls have him soaring at 35% at this point. What do you have to say for where you are in the race?
Well, I think one of the things that's underrepresented in the polls is that we do very well with younger audiences. We have college campuses, 20 college campuses organized in Iowa. We have over 400 college campuses organized across the country. And I think one of the reasons why we appeal to youth is that I'm for changing things. I think that kids who make a mistake with marijuana shouldn't be put in jail.
What do you have to say for that? Terrorism and our Islamophobia here in the country. Do you believe that there's Islamophobia? What do we have to do?
I think that one of the ways we do defend ourselves is having rules on who comes to visit, rules on who immigrates to the country, and it's a consistent theme. The people who are attacking us are Islamic. They do adhere to a radical form of Islam, and we have to protect ourselves.
What rules specifically would you want to implement, change, or just kind of make sure that you set in stone?
Well, I think we have to have a track of who comes in and who leaves and whether they're staying the appropriate time. There's 11 million people in our country who came here illegally. 40% of them came legally and then overstayed their visa. We don't do anything about it. We don't enforce our laws. So we have laws on immigration. We ignore them. There's 150,000 students every year who come from the Middle East. Many of them are good people, and it's great that they get to encounter America and the West, and hopefully that influences them in a positive direction.
Lately you've been saying that Hillary Clinton and Marco Rubio kind of share the same foreign policy ideals, and from my understanding you called it naive, expensive, dangerous. What options do you have, what alternatives do you have for that?
The neoconservative philosophy of Rubio and Clinton is that we should go into countries, topple the regime, get rid of the regime, and somehow miraculously out of that will spring Jeffersonian Democrats who love America. Well, it hasn't worked. We tried toppling Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Hillary Clinton supported that. Marco Rubio supported that. It's chaos over there. I mean, you have the rise of ISIS in that vacuum that was filled after we get rid of a dictator. Same with Gaddafi in Libya. Libya is a failed state. We are more at risk now with Gaddafi gone. A third of Libya pledges allegiance to ISIS. And frankly, I blame Marco Rubio. I blame Hillary Clinton. I blame the people who say, oh, we're going to spread American democracy and freedom around the world. Well, what they do is they get involved in the affairs of other countries, but then it's worse.
How do we fight off ISIS, would you say?
I think we have to protect our borders. So the first thing you have to do is defend your borders. You have to not let them come here. And that does mean some changes, and people are going to have to get tougher with border security. There are some good allies there. We should amplify them. The Kurds are pro-American, and they are not crazy aligned with al-Qaeda, and they will fight because they've lived in their homeland for a long time. I would arm them directly, and I would continue with air support, but the boots on the ground need to be Arabs, they need to be Muslims, and the only lasting peace will be Muslims stamp out this aberrant form of Islam.
What do you have to say about Donald Trump in the media, Donald Trump and his presence overall?
Oh God, do we have to talk about him? You know, I think really he represents some baser instincts that probably are not good for America. I worry that his narcissism could potentially become sort of an authoritarianism, that he's so smart and he's so powerful, just give him the reins of power and he'll make everything better. And it's kind of naive, and it goes against the historical notion that too much power in the presidency actually is what many of us, including our founding fathers, fought against.
Still to come on Iowa in Focus, we dig into the state issue that could put health coverage in jeopardy for people across the state of Iowa. Welcome back. This is The Real Story, where we'll take a closer look at some of the issues, even if it means going back a few days, weeks, months, or years. And today we take a look at how Medicaid is changing in Iowa right now. Medicaid is a program that helps pay for medical coverage for groups of people who have low incomes, are disabled, or elderly, or have any one of another long list of needs that qualifies them for a little extra help. Any disruption to that system could be painful.
Well, I think the worst that can happen is that while managed care organizations are taking a look at cutting costs, it also means cutting services for Iowa's most vulnerable.
As part of the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid was expanded within each state. At first, Iowa Governor Terry Branstad resisted until he was able to get a waiver allowing Iowa to work out the details about how to expand for itself. The result is a customized system where federal funding is used to pay for the policies that low-income patients select from healthcare.gov. It also has initiatives for people on Medicaid to monitor their own health. Branstad calls that having skin in the game. All that came together at the end of 2013. Then in February of 2015, Governor Branstad rolled out a new plan to run Medicaid. He called it the Governor's Medicaid Modernization Initiative, creating the Iowa High Quality Healthcare Initiative with 4 private companies who would provide Medicaid services, helping take the burden off the state budget. The Department of Human Services says the cost of providing Medicaid has increased 73% just since 2003 under the old but more traditional model. The transition to those private companies is scheduled to happen January 1st.
It's worked effectively in other states, and I see no reason why in Iowa we can't work it effectively.
For the most part, some Democrats were skeptical that this is the best way to move forward for Iowans. But then at the end of November, an administrative law judge recommended that one of the 4 contracts signed with the 4 private companies be thrown out. That judge said the company should have told the state about fraud and mismanagement involving former executives. The company said they would challenge the ruling. Governor Branstad said the shift to privatize Medicaid would stay on schedule. As of right now, the company is still going to be one of the 4 involved in that system.
These companies are very troublesome, to say the least. And so people here feel very passionately that if we were to move to managed care, that these are not the 4 companies to have.
The concerns over that switch broke down largely along party lines. The benefit pushed by Republicans is that working with a limited number of private companies saves the state money. Democrats are concerned that the quality of care will suffer, even with assurances from the governor's office that the level of coverage will stay exactly the same throughout the transition.
Nobody had any answers for me. Nobody knew anything that was going on.
People falling through the cracks, providers not receiving reimbursement, all of which can really lead to some bad outcomes.
Under managed care, as we've heard from company representatives, they will be making determinations on whether or not what your doctor is prescribing as care is really necessary.
It's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It's frustrating, but it looks like it's going to happen.
That's where the state is right now. This past week, officials from the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services were in Des Moines to review the plan to privatize Medicaid services. But after the prep work to get the transition ready and then the protests from the people that you just heard from who are afraid that it's not going to go well, if those federal officials decide that Iowa isn't ready, they'd be able to stop the transition scheduled for January 1st. Or if they decide it'll be okay, they can let it go through. Coming up after the break, the tweet from one Iowa politician that gave sports fans in the Hawkeye State a good chuckle last week. Welcome back. We'll close the show each week by taking a look at what happened on social media. And this past weekend, the Navy commissioned a ship named for Jackson, Mississippi, which is named for Andrew Jackson. That caused a little bit of a controversy since Jackson owned slaves, and the NAACP says a ship shouldn't be named after him. That got some folks going on Facebook. Edward says, I personally don't see an issue. The military has always held the honor and respect and continuing a close relationship with city, states, or individuals that they share namesakes with, regardless of their affiliations. Randy says political correctness and victimhood is getting ridiculous, and Cheryl chimes in with, we can find something wrong with everyone and everything. Now we take a look at their voice. That's what the politicians are posting on social media. The Iowa Hawkeyes are getting a lot of attention because they're off to a Rose Bowl even after losing the Big Ten championship last week. Thing is, they lost that game in the last 30 seconds, and that was a problem for Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. Before the game was over, she congratulated the team on their win. Problem was, the team lost. The account quickly deleted the tweet and said it was a staff error, and then congratulated the Hawkeyes on their seasons. Most fans probably forgot once they heard about the Rose Bowl anyway. Donald Trump was busy on Twitter during the week talking about how the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos so that he can keep his taxes low. Bezos has been working on a project that would send a rocket into space, so you may see where this is going. Bezos finally tweeted, trashed by @RealDonaldTrump, will still reserve him a seat on the Blue Origin rocket, #SendDonaldToSpace. And he linked to a video promoting the project. That got a lot of play on Twitter. You can follow along on Twitter and Facebook all week long, see our interviews as we do them, chime in with what you think, and send us your favorite pictures from the event you go to. Every week will end with the week ahead, a chance for you to see what the different campaigns are up to. Later today, Bernie Sanders is in eastern Iowa, in Waterloo, Mount Vernon, and Davenport. Republican John Kasich is back in Iowa on Wednesday in Ankeny and Thursday in Waterloo. And Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton just announced this week that she'll make her long-awaited trip to Keota High School after students there launched a social media campaign asking her to show up. That trip will be on December 22nd. Thanks for watching Iowa in Focus, and be sure to tune in next week to get all the clear facts right here on Iowa in Focus.